Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about the 3 keys for success at anything. And before I dive into what those keys are, I want to talk a little bit about success. I was listening to a talk by a spiritual teacher named Osho, and he had a really funny and enjoyable delivery around a really simple message that living successfully isn't something that happens in the future, that our pursuit of money, relationships, knowledge, power, prestige, comfort, the idea that there's some place that we'll get to where we can relax and take it easy, where everything is good from then on. Well, I think that's actually what happens when we die, and that living successfully only happens right here, right now, because this is the only place that life is. The future is a fantasy, and the future never comes because it is always only right now. And living deeply, fully engaged in the present moment is the ultimate goal of life. But living deeply engaged right here, right now, doesn't mean that we do nothing, because life is actually a verb, and we are constantly being and becoming. Nothing is static here. So the goals, aspirations, desires, and dreams that we have need to be addressed, can only be addressed in the present moment. And the same is true for our fears, our discomfort, our unresolved emotional wounds and suffering. Those are calling our attention as well. And at any moment, we have a complex configuration of desire and connection, creativity and inspiration, with suffering, discomfort, dis-ease. Our body-mind-spirit complex is like a two-way radio, receiving and transmitting information constantly. We're in a perpetual feedback loop with the larger consciousness system, co-creating reality. And there's what we want from life, and there's what life wants from us. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation is our experience. So the whole idea of success, as I have come to hold it, is not about getting the most cash and prizes at the end. The finish line of this race is death. And for me, success, as I cross that finish line, is about being surrounded by people I love who love me back and leaving the world perhaps just a little bit better than how I found it. Because when we exit this particular incarnation, we don't get to take any of the physical stuff with us. We leave it all behind. Our body, our possessions, any ego ideas of success based on knowledge and power. But from what I can tell, we do bring our non-physical connections with us. My limited view on this side of the life-death cycle, the moment of our death is perhaps the most important moment of our life. What we bring with us, love and gratitude, generosity, wisdom, or hatred, resentment, fear, and resistance, has a lot to do with what our next incarnation, or the work we might have to do there, is on the other side. Now, I'm unattached to that, and we'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, how do we live successfully now? And for me, the 3 keys to successful living, simple as they are, each pose a unique challenge on any given day. The 3 keys to success in anything in our life are to show up, to tell the truth, and to let go of the results. And so how do we show up for life? Well, the first and most practical practice of showing up is to actually go where you're supposed to go, when you're supposed to go there, and to do what you have agreed to do, even if those agreements are internal. I've been working with a client lately who needs to change careers. He does physical work, and his joints just can't do it anymore. He's always wanted to be a musician. He's made music on and off most of his life and kept it all to himself. Very interested in music production and actually has his own unique style. And as we've talked about taking actionable steps toward this goal of making money from music, and looked at how he organizes his time, he spends almost no time at all doing the thing that he most wants to do. And that's not uncommon. For our dreams, our desires, and the things that bring us the most joy, to stay in the realm of fantasy. One of the really cool, creative powers that we have as humans is to take thoughts, inspiration, and intuition and bring them into physical reality. We get to make stuff happen here on the material realm. I actually think we're on the cutting edge of this co-creating reality process, and that all of the universal life force, call it God, angels, guides and teachers, our own highest self, is right here with us, cheering us on. Make that music, yeah. So nothing happens if we don't show up. And I introduced this particular client to an almost unknown 12-step fellowship called Under Earners Anonymous. I'll put a link to UA in the show notes. And Under Earners Anonymous talks about under-earning money, of course, but they also talk about under-being and the idea of not actually living, expressing, or manifesting all of who we really are for the benefit of ourselves and others. That most of us play too small. We hide our light for 1,000 reasons, mostly based on past hurts or fear of the future. We don't actually show up now. And this client and I did an inner journey to this creative part of themselves that got particularly wounded and suppressed as a teenager. And we brought his best adult self with all the experience he's had and all the work that he's done, and this conscious spiritual connection that he has made with the loving, supportive wisdom and power of, for him, guides and teachers. And I often work with shamanic principles and find the spirit of nature most accessible to a lot of people. So for him, it shows up as a polar bear and this towering green goddess who carries a ukulele. And we told his 13-year-old self, you don't need to live in that little room in Iowa anymore with a depressed mother and an alcoholic father and a mean older brother. We're going to bring you into present time now. And his creative, enthusiastic, and brilliantly quirky teenage self was totally psyched. And my client was able to reconnect with this suppressed part of his own musical inspiration. And this inspired part of himself actually doesn't give a shit what anyone else thinks, wants to go down the beach and play music, whether people listen or not. Now, my client's actually not ready to do that yet, but he can grow toward it, but he has to show up now. So we talked about doable, manageable chunks. Every journey happens one step at a time. I just did a truck transport adventure. Flew to Ohio and got to help drive a big hook truck, 2,500 miles across the heartland. Super fun, pretty long, but that journey happened 1 mile at a time. Rest stop to rest stop. And so my client and I talked about what was actually manageable and doable for him, because setting intentions for ourselves and fulfilling them is like miracle grow for our soul. Creates hope, healthy ego development, keeping our own commitments with ourselves and doing the hard or scary thing is perhaps the most positive character building work we can do. I know because I spent decades of my life avoiding my own dreams, and I've spent the last few years gathering the resources to be able to face my fears and co-create or manifest a lot of really cool stuff. I wrote a book. I have a podcast. How did that happen? One day at a time. And we need a lot of help. And so what do we need to be able to show up? So we established that 3 30-minute sessions a week, working toward his goal of making and producing music, was doable and achievable. And at first he was like, that's not enough. We think we need to do the whole thing at once, but we can't. Doesn't work that way. Showing up consistently, day after day, month after month, year after year, will bring us much further on that journey than one big rocket blast that usually lands us back in the ocean. I personally hope I never have a viral experience. Just seems too violent for me. And so we had him set some alarms for the times that he would do these 3 sessions. 2 of them focused on actually making and producing music. And one of those sessions focused on business, the part that was the harder, to actually post some of the music that he'd already made. Reconnect with some agents who had actually purchased work from him before. And then it was okay to ask for help to be able to show up, to do some spiritual practice, to connect with Polar Bear and Emerald Woman, to ask for their love and support and power to be able to do this scary thing, face his own resistance, move forward toward his own dreams and desires. And his inner 13-year-old self was jumping up and down. And I was thrilled that I got a text because I suggested that it's really important to celebrate and share our success and to have accountability. That's often part of showing up. Often accountability is easier if it's an external thing. If we have to go to work, we need to drive our kids to school. Making commitments can be really helpful to get us to show up, to do the next thing that brings us forward in the present moment. Stepping into the stream of life. And in that 30-minute business session, he texted me he was able to post almost all of his old music. Way more than he expected. And one of the 30-minute sessions turned into an hour and a half of music production. And I asked him how he was going to celebrate his success. He had never thought about that. But this showing up brought a wave of enthusiasm, hope, and momentum. But I encouraged him not just to look for the next goal, but to take a minute and really notice that he had done the hard and scary thing. He showed up for himself. And we sent celebratory text emojis back and forth. I'm so happy for him. He said he celebrated by dancing with his dog, which made them both very happy. I know for myself, showing up has always been the hardest thing. My mother let me stay home from school anytime I wanted, and I had a lot of anxiety as a kid, so I stayed home a lot. Writing my book was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. In fact, I still, for the most part, need to have some kind of an external commitment to be able to do any writing. In the first 2 years of the book writing process, I had to pay someone to sit with me every time I wrote, or it wouldn't happen. I'm in a free writing group now, so we just all get together and have a few hours on Zoom where we check in the beginning and check in at the end. But it took me years to get to that point because in the beginning of writing for me, I really needed someone to hold my hand very directly. And that's part of honesty. So the second key of success is honesty. And there's honesty about what we really need. There's honesty about what we really want. And then there's the honesty of our own authentic truth, which often requires us to confront our own ideas of who we should be, how we should be, what other people expect us to be, and to gather the clarity and the courage, again, one day at a time, to bring our own deepest truth into the world, relationally, professionally, creatively, emotionally, intellectually. I'll be honest, I have a lot of well-formed ideas that I still don't have the balls to say out loud because they feel too controversial. And I aspired to grow the cojones to be able to say them. But you'll have to stay tuned and find out. One way to understand my musical client's honesty is the expression of his music. That's his own truth coming out in melodic form. Part of his truth was also that he needed help and his willingness to accept it. From me, from Under Earners Anonymous, from his own spiritual practice, and reconnecting with his own inspired, authentic self. Telling the truth in the broadest sense is a risk. It's also a creative act, it feels to me. When I tell my truth, and that may not just be verbally, I might express it in my actions, in my reactions. Saying no is as much a truth as saying yes. When I bring my truth into the world, it is a catalyst. My responsibility, I believe, is to hold the intention that I bring my truth with the highest good of everyone in mind, But that doesn't mean that people are comfortable. I have another client with a particularly manipulative mother, and they have a long cycle of the mother kind of collapsing in many different ways and then manipulating my client, their adult child, to help them with housing, with money, with emotional issues. The roles have almost always been flipped, where the child is the parent of the parent, not unusual. And although socially, culturally, and even relationally between them, the idea is that the child should help the parent, but it's a really destructive and dysfunctional pattern. And it makes my clients sick. And their truth is to say no to their mother. Supporting another person's dysfunction generally doesn't help them on the highest level. Although it may keep them comfortable in the short run, in the long run, it keeps them sick. And so telling our truth can be excruciating. And that brings us to the third key, which is to leave the results to God. Now, we are responsible for showing up, for knowing what our truth is, and for the how and when and circumstances that we reveal or share that truth. But I do believe, because we are all interconnected, that the highest truth for one is the highest truth for everyone involved, whether we're aware of it or not. And we don't have to do this perfect. It's a wide sidewalk we're all walking on. And we can use the truth to harm people. I've whipped out my Uzi of honesty more than once. You want the truth? I'll tell you the fucking truth. No. You can use the truth to harm people and justify it. That's not what I'm talking about. It's very important to have integrity and good intentions. But if something harms me, being with that truth and asking for change or removing myself from the situation is my responsibility. So truth is a catalyst for change, and I do not have control over what that change will bring. And that's the number 3, letting go of the results part, which means not being in control. And although we really are almost never in control of our life, we like to believe that we are. My experience is the more I can connect with and surrender to the larger flow of the life force in any given moment, the more that fear dissolves. My own long experience with particularly emotional dishonesty, mostly by withholding the truth, was all based in fear of what would happen if I did tell the truth. My own desire or need to feel like I was in control, and a terror of letting go. Because I didn't trust God. I didn't believe the universe had my highest good in mind. I didn't believe that who I authentically was good enough. I was afraid that if I did show up and tell the truth, that bad things would happen. People would reject me. I wouldn't receive the love and connection that I really wanted. And I'm going to tell you that all of that came true. That when I showed up and told the truth, people did leave my life. There was rejection. And some of my deepest fears actually were realized. That's the disclaimer. But the excellent news is that those people, places, and things that I was so attached to were limited, destructive, restrictive systems that could never support my authentic self. They could never bring me the actual love and connection that I really wanted. I was standing in front of an empty well, begging it to give me water, and it couldn't because the well was dry. And so I tried to pretend I wasn't thirsty. Didn't work very well. For me, that well was my family, and I was actually kind of forced to show up and tell the truth. And what I discovered, or was brought to, was an ever-flowing, infinitely nourishing, perpetual spring of life. And my cup runneth over. And for me, the things I was most afraid to let go of were the things I most needed to let go of, so that new, more supportive, more encouraging sources and resources could take their place. So the 3 keys to success in any given day, and we can only be successful one day at a time, are to show up, to tell the truth, and to let go of the results. And I encourage you to look at the different areas of your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, professionally, creatively. Where can you apply these 3 keys to unlock yourself and to step into that stream of life that has only your highest good in mind? Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out how this work can benefit you or learn more about my mentorship program, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. We'll set up a free discovery call, or you can DM me on Instagram @ReneeLaValleyMcKenna. You can click the link in the show notes if you want a free download of the first chapters of my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing. And thanks as always to my supporters on Patreon. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValley McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.